I rise with great pleasure to follow the noble Lord Oates with a very powerful, persuasive and rich speech. And I join echo the noble Lord in paying tribute to the noble Lord Hayne for all of the work he's done in this area. Now, the noble Lord Oates said that, acknowledged, I think absolutely rightly, the International Anti-Corruption Court, which I would absolutely back, and I think clearly is growing by the day, the backing for it. The noble Lord said this is one of many tools that we need to tackle these issues of economic crime. Well, what I'm seeking to do with my Amendment 106A is to put in another tool in the toolkit, a tool that perhaps at the moment is in a stage of prototype and rather earlier development than the International Anti-Corruption Court, but is one that is growing fast and has significant international backing. So what this is I'm proposing that the government should provide leadership in supporting the UN General Assembly Resolution 77244, which was passed right at the end of last year, 30th of December, with the leadership from Nigeria and the Africa Group, which calls on the Secretary-General to prepare a report on how to, quote, strengthen the inclusiveness and effectiveness of international tax cooperation. This has been seen as a step towards the UN Convention on the issue and the establishment of international bodies to enforce it. And I hope that some of the noble lords taking part in this debate today or reading this later would be interested in joining me in pushing this forward as an issue that clearly Britain could and should be a leader in. Now, I have, due to the limited scope of this bill, had to cut down somewhat what the General Assembly resolution says, but I still think there's steps that we can take forward going here, and I'll be very interested in hearing the Noble Lord the Minister's response to the government's response to this UN General Assembly resolution. Because I think it's very clear, following on from what the Noble Lord Oates said, that chasing economic crime money, chasing perhaps particularly tax evasion, is what's known in the jargon as a wicked problem. The aims of the evaders are simple, their reach is global, the ability to act is measured in seconds. Money can be shifted with less than the click of my fingers. Whereas nation-states have very complex goals of development, rights and the rule of law, their powers are individually restricted within their own borders, their legal framework is limited in resources, as we were discussing in the last group, and frequently takes a lot of time to move into action. So I think it's worth looking at what Atiya Warris, the UN independent expert on the effects of foreign debt, told the UN General Assembly last year. The shortcomings of the international and national tax systems require international cooperation and assistance. This cannot be addressed unilaterally. And I think the UN Convention, the idea of the UN Convention's got virtually no coverage or attention in the UK, but internationally there's a great deal of work going on, as reflected by a letter sent in March to the UN Secretary-General by scores of civil society organisations, which included some that will be familiar to Noble Lords, ActionAid, the Tax Justice Network, and World Economy, Ecology and Development. That letter put it bluntly: decision-making on global tax rules has been left to non-inclusive forums, wherein especially developing countries have not been able to participate on an equal footing. This injustice is at the heart of the failure of the international tax system, which has continued to be characterised by inefficiency, incoherence and beggar-thy-neighbours policies, which have contributed to the alarming growth in global inequality. Now, what I wanted to do was put down a broader amendment that addressed all aspects of the UN resolution, because I think that what is not actually illegal, tax dodging, is utterly indefensible. Taking money from the mouths of hungry children, taking medicines from health systems that are desperately striving to care for their people. But I've gone as far as I can within the limits of this bill. Now, there's a great deal of work has already been done on this. The proposal for a UN Convention on Tax was published by the Global Alliance for Tax Justice and the European Network on Debt and Development in March 2022. That draws on examples. A lot of this, there are pre-existing parallels in governance structures, approaches and principles from the Rio Conventions, international human rights instruments, and the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. And I think it is worth setting out the background to this, because it has been said that let's leave this to the OECD. The OECD has said we're the organisation that should do this. It's over decades, under its framework, it's had a international tax regime whose main purpose was to prevent double taxation. That's what the focus has been. Not collecting tax, but preventing so-called over-collection. It also excludes the majority of the world from its deliberations. So we hear often talk of global Britain, of wanting to be world-leading. Well, here's a real opportunity. As Professor Lorraine Eden from the University of Texas A&M puts it, quote, large changes in international regimes usually require a tipping point and the cooperation of a like-minded club of nation-states to lead the change. What my amendment does is suggest that Britain should put itself at the forefront of that club of nations. We have the City of London, we have a great many lawyers and bankers and lots of other people who, pointed in the right direction, could be very useful to that effort. Competing in a world of laxer and laxer tax regimes has been a disaster for people and planet, an invitation to crime and corruption. Cooperation has to be the way forward to equip the world with the funds to tackle the looming polycrisis of environmental destruction, human desperation and rampant inequality.
My Lord, I speak to Amendment 103.